How good of a hire is Kyle Whittingham for Michigan? Well, 2 outlets have the grades, which we'll get into right here on this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Tuesday. We are back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Holt, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. Thank you to all of our everydayers who watch or listen to the show every single day. Also, a big thank you for making us your first listen. First, CBS Sports and The Athletic both have grades for the offseason head coaching hires. We'll get in what they have to say about Kyle Whittingham and Michigan. Then we'll dive deeper into the Jake Hill-led defense, some numbers that I think are a little bit eye-opening. Finally, ESPN has the top returning player for Michigan this year, and we're going to discuss that as well. So that's it. That's the show. All right, see you later. No, that's not how that works. It's not how I meant. That's the show. All right. So there's a lot to really like about what ESPN has to, not ESPN. What am I talking about? What am I even talking about? CBS and The Athletic have to say, but I have some bones to pick with one of them. So let's start with CBS, which is the better one here. Here's what they had to say about Kyle Whittingham. It says, wasn't exactly a stunner that Kyle Whittingham stepped down at Utah. He had been on retirement watch annually as he got older, but it was surprising that he ended up back in the game at Michigan. His identity should play well with the Wolverines, and the offense run by Jason Beck is tailor-made for Bryce Underwood. Grade A. It's what they led the article with. It's one of, I think, 3 or 4, and I don't remember right now. I wrote this last week about it, but 3 or 4 that got the A grade. And I think that is accurate. And I think that is exciting because it is one of those scenarios where, as much as I know a lot of you wanted Kalen DeBoer, and that certainly would have been a splash. And, I wanted Kenny Dillingham, and that might not have been as much of a splash, but that might have been your, 20-year head coach. Maybe, right? Like there was kind of no guarantees, right? Like, he's been a head coach as long as Jason Beck's been an offensive coordinator, right? So that just had the earmarks of like, this guy could end up being that dude. But I mean, his record is kind of not dissimilar from Kyle Whittingham, but Kyle Whittingham has 20 some years as being a head coach compared to Kenny Dillingham. And then there was the outliers. Some of them were never coming, never really considered by Michigan or what have you. Todd Monken would have been really interesting, but he ends up staying in the NFL and becoming a head coach in the NFL. Kind of always funny when that works out that way, because there's some that look at it and say like, he's not been a head coach anywhere but Southern Miss. Do not want, not good enough, and then ends up becoming an NFL head coach. Good, not good enough for you. Good enough for the NFL. Okay, right. We didn't learn the people that had that reaction. We didn't learn from the Mike McDonald of it all. We sure didn't. But I mean, that's high praise from CBS. I think the ultimate thing that makes this work and why it's a potentially great fit is because the team is going to play kind of the same brand of football, right? That's the interesting thing, right? It's the idea that, okay, this is a scenario where you're building from the trenches outward. It's a little bit more modern, right? Like Jim Harbaugh wasn't exactly like not modern, but, it was a little bit more antiquated, but it was kind of like, well, everyone, we're going to zig where everyone else sags. And we're going to do a little bit more of a modern version of the traditional pro style. But this is a little bit more modern than even that. So it's kind of the same idea. Again, I love the idea of being an 11 personnel and still being able to run the football. I think that is huge. So huge stuff there. Like that from CBS, but I want to spend just a little bit more time on Stuart Mandel from The Athletic, who, as if you followed Stuart Mandel, he's not exactly the biggest Michigan fan in general. And you can kind of feel and hear the snark here. But here's what he had to say. He said, Michigan got exactly the coach it needed to stabilize a program mired in scandal. The future Hall of Famer brings 2 decades of head coaching experience and 2 accomplished coordinators with him in offensive coordinator Jason Beck and defensive coordinator Jay Hill. The lone concern at 66, he's unlikely to be a long-term hire. Like, that depends on what you mean by long-term. If you mean, decades, like, no, he's probably doesn't have, 20 more years in him, right? Does he have 5, which is what his contract is? I would venture to guess. He seems like a young 66. Does he have maybe 7 or 8? Yeah, I think that's possible. And in today's college football, that's a lifetime. And, he can groom, even if it's 5, like if it's Jason Beck or whoever, he can groom his next replacement potentially if Michigan decides to go that route, if everything kind of goes well in his tenure. But I think you can probably guess where I have an issue. It's the Michigan got exactly the coach it needed to stabilize a program mired in scandal. Now, is that part of why they needed a hire like this? I mean, it was, but that's not the focal point. That's not what makes this a good hire. Now, I do want to say that Stuart Mandel made Michigan his tied for second in his grades. He gave Michigan an A- behind UCLA hiring Bob Chesney from James Madison, and tied with John Sumrall from Florida, which I don't know. It's with Florida, they always seem to make, that's a great hire. And then 3 years later, we're looking for someone else. Kind of how it goes down in Gainesville. And I know that acutely. My Uncle Donnie is a massive Florida Gators fan. So, yeah, I think that this wasn't a hire needed to stabilize. Any hire I think that they were going to make was going to do that. Now, I know that's from the outside looking in, that's what it is. But when you look at how the team stayed together and played, I think better than against Texas than most thought that they would. I know the score ended up being not as close as it was for, 2/3 of it, or 3/4 of it. But, that was kind of late mistakes. Bryce Underwood trying to play hero ball when all he really needed to do was just play within himself, I think, a little bit more. But you can see that, like, as far as like the players, the program, all of those things, it was fine, right? It was not as affected by whether it was the Sharon Moore, and like no one really cares really, truly in Ann Arbor about Burgergate or Signgate. Some people are going to constantly bring that up. Heck, the rivals in particular are going to bring up things, make up things, right? Like the Dusty May is a tamper agent type of thing. Like, that's just absurd. But I don't think that it was necessarily necessary to stabilize. It was more so the move to take it and move it forward. It's not about stabilizing it. It's about maximizing what's there. It's about finding a guy that can look at what they've got in terms of a roster and say, I know what to do to get the most out of these guys. And that's where it just kind of fits like a glove, because of what I said in the CBS portion of the idea that this is a Michigan roster that's already kind of primed to do exactly what Kyle Whittingham wants to do. And, like, you've got a Jordan Marshall that can run the football. You've got an offensive line. Defensive line maybe needs a little bit of building up, but like, as I've said kind of time and time again, is this defensive line worse than what Jay Hill has worked with at BYU? I don't think it is. So when you have that, I think that it's, you're kind of cooking with gas a little bit with this. Now, schedule caveats aside, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if like a guy that has kind of historically shown ways that he can build something and he can get the most out of guys that are certainly coming out of high school a lot worse than what these Michigan players are. It stands to reason that it would, that he would be able to do the same here, because he's got 20 years worth of doing it. And that's where it ends up being like a consequential hire. Like, yes, if they would have gotten one of the other guys, it would have been exciting. This is a little bit more of like, okay, this just might be right. This just might be the exact right thing at the right time. And that's really all you need. So I'm not going to argue with A-. I'm going to argue with the coach that needed to stabilize a program mired in scandal. That's just like inserting your own fun little narrative there. It doesn't really affect the team. It hasn't really affected the team in ways that people want to make all of the things sound, right? Like, Michigan's not really mired in scandal, except for those who wish it to be mired in scandal, essentially. That's not me having my head in the sand. That's just the reality of it. All right, we're going to move on. Let's talk about that defense. Let's talk about Jay Hill. I've got some numbers here and some things that I think are interesting. Let's get to that here in just a moment. But before we do, this is Mazda's moving the game forward for those who show that there's more to the score than what's on screen. Though Michigan lost to Duke on Saturday, there were some solid performances that kept the Wolverines in the game. Yaxel Lendeborg led all scorers with 21 points, while Morez Johnson Jr. and Adai Mara put up 13 and 10 respectively. LJ Kaysen was a big spark off the bench here with only 7 points. Had Michigan not gotten into foul trouble in the first half, who knows what could have been? But even so, they never gave up and were still in the game until the end. These remind us of what it takes to really raise the bar. It's that extra work off the court, dialing in the extra every detail, giving it that extra fire and that grit that I never quit. We put the same passion into every model. Highlights make the reel. What it took to get there makes it count. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you. All right, we're going to continue on here in just a moment. But before we do, all right, cursor, there we go. Ever wanted to experience the NBA Finals live and in person? Well, FanDuel is giving you the chance to turn that dream into reality with their NBA sweepstakes. Here's how it works. Use your profit boost on any NBA future and you'll automatically be entered for a shot to win an NBA Finals trip for 2. That's right. Flights, tickets, the whole experience. If you're already looking at the board and thinking about which team can make a deep run, then this is the perfect time to lock it in. I love futures this time of year, whether it's picking a team to win the championship or grab a conference title. It adds that extra layer of excitement to every game down the stretch. And now not only can your pick cash, but it could also send you to the finals. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Use your profit boost on an NBA future and get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you for making Locked On Wolverines your first listen, but now is the time to dig deeper, to be better, just, be a better, well-rounded human. The way you do that is by joining the Everydayer Club. You get every single show ad-free on audio if you want that, but the members-only Discord is where it's at. You would have known first about several things that have happened. You would have gotten my opinions on several things before I put them on the show. Whether some opinions just never make it onto the show, right? You can ask me anything. I'm going to answer it as openly and honestly as I can, which usually... we do that on the show, but it's even better when it's behind a paywall because I don't have to worry about a bunch of leakage out there. I don't have to worry about suddenly there being like Instagram posts tagging the coaches and stuff like that. So it's $5 a month or $50 a year. It's a steal. It's an absolute steal. It's certainly worth it, especially as we move into spring ball and all of that. So check out LockedOnWolverines@supercast.com or the show notes to learn more. All right. Jay Hill, BYU defensive coordinator the last 3 seasons. Maybe not quite as exciting as some other names out there, and certainly kind of took a minute to get going. As you look kind of across the board, year 1 was kind of not great. Year 2 was great. Year 3 was a slight drop back. Now, as he says in his own words, that this is the most complicated defense in the country. This is also part of like the fits like a glove thing because it's not like terribly different than it's different, but it's not terribly different than what he takes over. So you feel like the players that he inherits who are from the Wink Martindale defense are going to be able to figure this out like relatively quickly. And yes, like it's still going to take all the time to install, right? That like he isn't just saying like at other places, it takes until, through fall camp to install. No, he's talking about Michigan. But I think that he's got smart, heady players that know how to be able to handle this. This isn't just like pure athletes that can just go and do necessarily. I mean, some of it is, but that, other schools don't necessarily need to be like, okay, we need to make sure that we got guys that can handle the system. And I think that the players that are already in Ann Arbor kind of fit the system perfectly. So that's great. But he took over the 94th defense in the country when he went to BYU, coming off of his stint at Weber State. Ends up being a little bit worse in total defense the next year, 109th, but then all the way to 13th and then 35th in those next 2 years. As I said, the last 2 years, his leading tackler has been a second-year linebacker. So that's kind of why I'm not fretting too much the fact that they weren't able to get KD Olave. Would have been really nice. But you figure the Troy Bulls, Nathaniel Usu-Boateng, Chase Taylor, trifecta along with AC Moa and some of these other players, I think that's going to really work out. Max Alford, who played for him directly as well. I think that's going to be good for him to have. But here's a couple things that I didn't really know until today. They were absolute ball hawks the last couple of years, really since he took over. So the fact that you've got players like Jair Hill and Smith Snowden and Zeke Berry, guys who all have had interceptions over the course of their careers. This is kind of where you wish you still had a Cole Sullivan, but you don't. They had ninth. They were ninth in the country. I don't mean to say they have ninth. They were ninth in interceptions last year. In 2024, the year they were 13th in the country in total defense, they were first in the country. And they were 20th even in the year that they weren't necessarily that great. Imagine what it will be like to have the better players than what he is accustomed to having and the ability to be ball hawk. So this is a defense that is really going to get after it in terms of that. Now, don't expect them to be like the craziest in terms of sacks. 44th in the country last year, 98th the year before, 132nd in his first year. So that's almost at the bottom out of 136 teams or 134 teams that year rather. But even like last year they were 35th in total defense, 19th in scoring defense this last year, regardless. So that's a big difference, right? Like that to be like 16 places off. Right. And they were actually a little bit worse in terms of like they had the 13th defense in 2024, but 18th in scoring defense. So teams were getting a little bit better of them in terms of moving the ball and scoring that year compared to last year, where teams could move the ball, but they weren't necessarily scoring at the same rate that they were able to move the ball. So that kind of at least tells you that it's, and it doesn't tell you that it's bend, don't break, but that his teams have found a way. Okay. Last thing I have here is opponent third down conversions, because we've seen that in Ann Arbor, right? Like Michigan has been really good first and second downs, especially against big opponents. And then third down comes along. It's like 3rd and 18 and suddenly like USC's running for 90 yards, right? Like it's insane. We've gotten accustomed to that in Ann Arbor throughout Wink Martindale. Listen, I love Wink. That was a problem that never got quite fixed. Okay. But they were 19th last year after being 85th the year before in opponent third down conversions. By comparison, Michigan was 53rd in the country last year. So not great, not the worst, but okay. So and Michigan, I think, forced a lot of third and long. So I think it might be a little bit different. So what you're seeing here is a defense that is going to get after it. They're not necessarily, we'll see if they get to the quarterback, but they still were able to get all those interceptions without getting to the quarterback. So that's interesting in and of itself. Now, that's obviously partially player dependent, but he's got a track record. We've seen it consistently. And I think that is going to be an interesting thing. And then he's just going to be, having different players that he can deploy. That is just like, it's the difference between at worst having like a regular Dodge Challenger and then suddenly getting a Dodge Demon, right? Like, okay, got the regular Dodge Challenger. I can take it out on the road. It's going to be good. It can, it can keep up with a lot of cars, type of thing. But like the Dodge Demon is going to, it's going to outpace even some hypercars, some supercars, so that type of thing. So, he has that capability, I think. So maybe overshadowed by Jason Beck, who, like I said yesterday, is probably the most consequential coordinator hire, in my opinion. But certainly this has the earmarks of being something that could really, really, really work out. And I'm excited about what that's going to look like. All right. I just want to see something real quick. I feel like, okay. I think that's fine. Okay. That's it. I'm just playing around for a second, doing my own thing. Never mind me. All right, we're going to move on. Let's talk about ESPN. This is who it says Michigan's best returning player is. We'll see if you agree with it. We'll get to that here in just a moment. But before we do, workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one position you still have to fill still sitting open. When the pressure's on and you need the right hire, this is a job for sponsored jobs. Indeed, sponsored jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for, skills, experience, location, so you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. Here's the stat that says it all. In the minute that I've been talking to you, companies like yours have made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. And listeners of this show, that's the great part. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help your job get the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. All right, ESPN put out its with their own little rankings, right? Like here's the best player on the best teams that they've deemed to be the best in their own rankings. Michigan 18th according to ESPN, and the too early, what have you. But they put this out and they say that the best returning player, drum roll. There's no drum roll. I could insert one. I'm not doing that. It is Bryce Underwood. Surprise, surprise. New Michigan coach, this is ESPN talking, Kyle Whittingham prioritized retaining Underwood as soon as he got the job and met with him before his introductory news conference to seek his feedback on the program and sell him on the new offensive vision. The former number 1 overall recruit stuck with the Wolverines and stayed out of the portal after a promising debut season in which he produced 2,820 total yards, 17 touchdowns, and 11 turnovers over a 9-win season. Whittingham and his coaches had several more critical retention wins in January, with running back Jordan Marshall returning and offensive lineman Andrew Sprague, Jake Warnera, defensive lineman Eno Etta, and defensive back Zeke Berry, all withdrawing their names from the transfer portal. So here's where I stand with this. Does Bryce Underwood have the capability of being the best returning player? Yes. Is he currently the best returning player for Michigan? That one's a little bit harder to say for me, because I think like if they didn't keep Underwood, it's like, you know, I was talking to Steve Dace about this before. He was like, well, if they can't keep him, they'll just get Devin Dampier and they'll be fine. And I'm inclined to agree with him there. As long as they were able to keep like Jordan Marshall, I think that and, you know, and the offensive line, right? Like, I think like the 2 offensive linemen that they mentioned, more important for them to keep in some ways. Now, not always, just some. This isn't me saying like, yeah, I'd rather keep Jake Warnera over Bryce Underwood. I'm not saying that. But I think it was more pivotal for the potential success of this team, because I think that they could have gotten a quarterback that would have fit their system. But I think the other part of it is, how does Bryce end up being this year? Does he end up being the best player on the team? And that's a different conversation, because I think that he absolutely has that capability and that potential. It is just a matter of fixing those mistakes. Like just mentioning the amount of turnovers, 11 turnovers. Like if that number is like 6, right? Then, you know, if it's like 18 touchdowns and 6 interceptions, we're looking at something a lot, you know, maybe not a lot different, but a little bit different. You know, at least, you know, maybe they at least beat Texas, and you're coming off of a 10-3 season rather than a 9-4 season. And not just a 1-game improvement year over year, which is still kind of shocking to me. And that, you know, like the schedule a little bit harder in terms of the home away, but like didn't have quite as challenging of opponents on the schedule. No Indiana on there, no Oregon. You know, you had USC for a second straight year. You had Oklahoma on there instead of Texas, and they still kind of walked away. Well, you still ended up having Texas, but still walked away with something relatively similar. So, yeah, I think that that's going to be the key, is just getting the most out of Underwood. So he is the type of guy you can build your team around. So most important returning player, yes. Best, I don't know if he's there yet. That's kind of what my argument is here. And I absolutely think that once the ink is dry, once he leaves Michigan, I think that the chances, especially with the coaching he's about to get and all of that, I think absolutely we will likely be talking about him as being one of the best Michigan players of all time. But it's kind of hard because his sophomore year, because we expect him to leave after his junior year, his sophomore year, really difficult schedule. We'll see what it looks like in 2027. Obviously, if it stays on the books, a road trip to Texas is no joke whatsoever. But, you know, if he rises to his potential, it's kind of like, well, they can beat anybody in the country. But is he there yet? No, he's not there yet. So I'm just curious to see what that ends up looking like as it goes forward. But was it the right choice for ESPN to say Bryce? Probably. I'm not arguing that hard about it. We're just kind of more talking. I'm not really sure what, like, if you could cheat and say like, well, the offensive line retentions along with the running back, then maybe we're talking about something different. But it would be a little bit different if it was like, convincing Mason Graham to come back for another year or something like that, which obviously not eligible for, if it was, if it stayed this past year, he still would have been eligible. But you know what I mean? Like that would be the only type of thing. And they don't have that type of guy where it's like they absolutely needed to keep him more than Underwood. It's so interesting. But yeah, that's it. That's all I got. All right, we will talk Michigan basketball tomorrow, as well as kind of discussing whoever ends up being the guest on In the Trenches and what they have to say. That's at least the plan for now. So thanks for watching. Thank you for listening. We'll talk to you again soon. Peace.